Warhammer, a series filled to the brim with lore, blood and guts, cool as shit species and characters, and yet it's degraded to overpriced grave figures that you need to paint so you and your friends can play pretend. Yes, as we all know, Warhammer is an extremely popular tabletop game released all the way back in 1987, and since then it's took the world of nerds by storm, myself included. Shine bright like a diamond. This entire series taking place in the 41st millennia, of which there is only war and nothing else, stood the test of time and is something that is ripe for adaptation, right? Well, you'd be correct. And over the course of a couple of weeks, I've really been starting to get heavily invested into the Warhammer franchise through watching Henry Cavill gush over his favorite factions, watching people waste their children's school tuition funds on an overabundance of plastic figures that probably is also busy filling their lungs with some sort of hazardous chemical thanks to the paints they're buying that'll probably take its toll on them in the next 40 years, and of course playing a shit ton of the games. But you see, as much as I've been enjoying playing games like Dawn of War, Gladius Relics of War, and every other type of game that proves to me that I have the cognitive capabilities of a caveman that's about to go on a future shock rampage, there is one genre I've noticed that Warhammer hasn't graced all too much, and at the same time, graced a lot more than I thought, and that genre in question are first-person shooters. Yes, for a series that primarily revolves around a ruthless intergalactic war, where people wearing these gigantic bulky S&M suits carrying these beauties, it never really seemed to have crossed anybody's mind that putting us in the boots of these soldiers and letting us go apeshit with these weapons was a good idea. No, instead we got the opportunity to play Ozu. But I also say that it's been graced more than I thought, because throughout Warhammer's run in the video game space, there's been a total of 8 first-person shooters set within this universe, both for Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Fantasy. So I decided, fuck it, since there's so few first-person shooters taking place in this universe, I decided why not play every single one of them. And to start this video off, we need to head all the way back to 1993. Yes, I'm pretty sure nobody saw this coming, but the very first FPS game to carry the Warhammer name was Space Hulk, developed by EA of all people, before they were well known as being a bunch of shits. And this game was released on MS-DOS, the Amiga, and PC 98, which to date makes this the oldest game I've covered on my channel. But don't worry though, Custer's Revenge will be next. So now you might be wondering, what is Space Hulk? If you thought it might be a spin-off to everyone's second favorite tank in Marvel Rivals, you'd be wrong. You see, Space Hulk is something set in the 40k universe, except where normal 40k you tend to take control of normal Space Marines, in Space Hulk you take control of a squad of Space Marine decked out in Terminator armor, which makes them big and makes them chunky. And the titular Space Hulks are these derelict spacecrafts that are no longer inhabited by nice people, I will tell you that much right now. So what exactly does EA's first crack at Space Hulk bring to the table? Well, let's make Doom with extra steps. You see, this game is an amalgamation of a first-person shooter as well as a tactical strategy game akin to the board game it's based on. Meaning that, yeah, sure, you can act like Doom Guy and go apeshit clicking on your screen to kill every enemy on sight, but you'll soon come to learn that that is a stupid idea. Because the main focus of Space Hulk is to control your squad of Terminators in order to efficiently complete every mission. What does each of these missions consist of? Not too sure, because I kept skipping the briefings because this guy's face looks like a flopping fish on 2x speed. So the gameplay consists as followed. You have your basic first-person view where you can freely move your Terminator and shoot wherever you're pointing at. But you can also look through the visors of the other members of your squad to see what they see, making this look like you were playing FNAF back when X-Files was still new. Meaning that you're going to need to switch to whatever squad member you think will be the best for whatever situation there is, because trust me, they ain't gonna be doing much without your input. But of course, if any of this seems overwhelming to you, need I remind you that you have this tactical map feature, where you can command every single one of your squad members, see the layout of the maps with more of it getting revealed as you explore, and most handy of all, being able to see where enemies are coming from. So if you're just capable of planning out everything meticulously enough, you might actually be able to pull each mission off. Also a nifty feature that you can take advantage of is this freeze button here, which pauses everything, allowing you to plan out everything without the fear of getting murked while you can't do shit. But to keep the tension high, it runs off of a timer, making you need to plan quickly before it runs out, but thankfully it does recharge over a certain period of time. Let me also tell you this, for the short time I ended up playing this, I actually had a really good time. As much as I love me a good old-fashioned first-person shooter adventure in this retro age, the added addition of you being able to strategize the entire mission and still letting you go wild as if you were playing Doom, this game was a pretty damn good time. I would have loved to keep playing, but sadly the game kept crashing every single time I died, which made my character sound more like he was having a seizure instead of getting his head ripped off by a gene stealer.
Ready!
And the fact that this game is an old-school PC game through and through, meaning that this game isn't going to be teaching you shit when it comes down to the controls and all the game's features. I only basically knew how to shoot things in the first-person view and plan the routes my Marines needed to go. Other than that, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And somehow, I was still able to beat 2 missions no problem, so at the very least this game passed the bozo check. Moving onwards 2 years later, EA decided to take another crack at the Space Hulk IP with Space Hulk Vengeance of the Blood Angels. And if that name doesn't sound like a Gwar album, then I'm not sure what does. This time though, this game was developed by a company called Chrysalis for the PC, PS1 and Sega Saturn, with a different company called Key Game developing a version for... oh, the 3DO. My goodness, you poor things. Anyways, I decided to stick to the PS1 version because I am a slave to my nostalgia. Now, basically, this is precisely the same game as the original Space Hulk, except with a few changes. Firstly, now since we've jumped 2 years into the future, the graphics of the game also got a massive improvement, finally moving over to a proper 3D environment, boasting a proper atmosphere on top of having vastly improved sound designs. Sprite work looks also a hell of a lot better thanks to the more powerful hardware, and overall the game has got a massive visual improvement. On top of that, I feel like gameplay itself was also massively improved as well. Well, yes, now you can't see all of your squad mates' view at the same time like you could in the previous entry. You now, however, are able to command them a lot easier because of shit actually making a little bit more sense this time around. Like having icons being more defined and squad mates constantly telling you what each command does. And the biggest difference in this game is that I also wasn't able to beat a single mission. Yes, this game was quite difficult, and it's also not like the OG Space Hulk was a cakewalk either. But over there, I was still at the very least able to beat 2 missions despite me not knowing shit about what I was doing. But here... damn it, dude, I just feel like the difficulty got ramped up here significantly, because I'd either keep dying to a Rule 34 hidden gem alien, because guess what, in these games you die in one single hit, and I'm not too sure what causes you to be able to randomly shove them off to give you another chance to attack back. I would accidentally waste ammo, which causes a game over because Space Hulk wants to teach you the value of conservation, or I would just give up mid-game because I have a job and a family, and these gene stealers' faces look like they're either laughing at me or trying to seduce me, and I don't know which side I'm leaning more to. On top of that, I also noticed that the freeze timer dropped significantly faster than it did in the original game, and part of this apparently was because of the board game had some changes made to its rules that was reflected in this game. But if that was the case, I'd rather shove those figures where the sun don't shine, because keep your shitty rules to your damn board game then. But despite my complaints, part of me thinks that this might be my favorite Space Hulk FPS, because I just love the strategic nature of the whole game, and I love the setting on top of that as well. So it definitely is something I want to go back to see if I can get better at it. And part of that means that for once I'm going to have to consider playing the fucking tutorial. And thus we finally reach our first proper FPS on the list, Fire Warrior, released in 2003 for the PS2 and the PC. Now in this game, it decided to ditch every single thing known to man when it comes down to the strategy route that this series was founded upon, and thought Halo looked a little bit more promising. Because yes, this game is essentially a Halo clone. Everything from the control scheme, the health system, and the fact that it's an FPS game with a space setting, you can definitely see that someone likes copying off the smart kids' homework. And if you're a video game buff, especially if you love the Warhammer series, then you may have actually heard quite a lot about this game and how it's not really that good. But let me tell you right here, the people who labeled this game as one of the worst games to ever grace the Warhammer 40k name, they were only half right. Let me explain. So am I probably close to 3 hours of playing this game? I can say that I think that is a competent enough shooter, but it's far from anything great. The best way how I can describe this game is that if Halo was made by modern day Ubisoft, meaning that it's something with an interesting premise, but feels like it's lacking soul. Because as I was playing this game, I just constantly felt like there was something missing. Like the intro, for example. This is supposed to be a large-scale battle, yet when it comes down to gameplay you'll be taking part in, it feels more like I'm just walking down a dirty grocery store aisle and constantly bumping into people that I don't like. It all just feels so underwhelming. Weapons, though, I thought were fun enough, mostly the stuff that you'll be getting off of the Imperial enemies like the las gun, the shotgun, energy pistol, sniper rifle, LMG, just to name a few. Like I said, I think that this game is more than a competent enough shooter, but I feel it falls more under the mediocre camp if I was to plop it somewhere. Hell, if I'm being completely honest here, I think the amount of fun you'll be having with this game doesn't necessarily come from the gameplay. Because remember how I said that this game does away with anything to do with strategy-related gameplay in favor of a more traditional first-person shooter? Well, it also does away with anything lore-accurate as well. Because in this game, you're plopped into the boots of a Tau fire warrior, hence the game's name. And besides the fact that this one single Tau is single-handedly able to take on all these different hordes of enemies, in some instances, you're pitted against literal groups of space marines. And when you kill them, you literally get the chance to equip their bolt guns. Yep, this game is absurd as shit, and I'll leave this segment with the last piece of text the game left me. Objective: kill all space marines. Objective completed. I killed every single space marine. Now moving over from 40k, we now head over to the realm of Warhammer Fantasy, where instead of space marines, aliens, and breaking every single rule the Geneva Convention has put in place, now we get to kill rats. Now Warhammer Vermintide at first glance might seem quite familiar to anybody who's a particular fan of Valve, and if that familiarity has crossed your mind, well then congrats, we've got ourselves a Left 4 Dead clone on our hands. And let me tell you, out of the abundance of Left 4 Dead clones I've played throughout my life, Vermintide is without a doubt the best game that we've gotten that copies Valve's IP. Because you want to know why? It's unapologetically a clone of Left 4 Dead. It doesn't add any unnecessary mechanics, it doesn't look like it's going to force a Pepsi down your throat. No, this is pure, plain and simple Left 4 Dead through and through, except with the added addition of having a Warhammer Fantasy skin slapped all over it. In Vermintide, you get to take control of 5 different classes, ranging from a guy with a big-ass hammer to a little guy who's got a powerful crossbow as a long-ranged weapon. And if that vague description wasn't telling enough, each character will specialize in different things, like for example, the guy with the big-ass hammer. He deals more damage, but is overall slower. The Steve class woman doesn't do nearly as much damage, but she makes up with it by having the speed advantage, and from the few hours that I've played, she has the largest amount of ammo out of every ranged weapon. Also, since you don't really pick up different weapons around the place, you mainly need to equip different weapons, armor, and trinkets either at the main hub or at these chests you'll find before each run. That I'm pretty sure does the typical RPG shit that you would imagine, like increased health, armor, damage, all that kind of stuff, but I never really saw or felt any difference aside from the melee weapon that you can equip, so at the very least there's that. Oh, and for some reason there's dice rolling too, because we need to infringe on D&D some way, right? But all jokes aside, I mean it when I say that this game is just Left 4 Dead in its purest form. Everything from taking on hordes of enemies to encountering special kinds of enemies that put you in a bind, needing your teammates to help you out of this shit show, to finding different kinds of stuff around the environment that you can use to buff both your speed and damage, to healing items, to grenades. This game knows what it wants to be and just rolls with it, and all in all, it's for the best of it in my opinion. I'm also gonna give a massive shout out to Vermintide 2 for being more or less the exact same game, with just some slight tweaking of the formula, like now having each of the characters have different unlockable subclasses, special abilities that you can unleash when this meter fills up, more enemy variety, different game modes like PvP and a roguelite style mode, and loot boxes. Because in the not future of whatever year this is supposed to be, there's only trends. But all in all, if you're looking for something that captures the pure adrenaline-filled action of Left 4 Dead, I can't recommend enough that you pick up both Vermintide 1 and 2. Hell, who knows? Maybe I'll make dedicated videos and streams on these two games as well and try it out with a bunch of you guys. But until then, I wonder what this type of gameplay style would look like in the 40k universe. Now, I have no idea why it took someone almost a decade to do a brand new Space Hulk FPS, but better late than never, I suppose. And if I'm being completely honest here, I think I would have rather wanted to wait for the 41st millennia that we could have gotten a better game. Now that might seem harsh, and yet it kinda was, because rage baiting people is funny, but much like Fire Warrior, I feel like Space Hulk is a game that's got a very interesting idea and premise behind it, but unfortunately it just falls flat on its face because this son of a bitch is boring. Now, just by looking at my gameplay, that thought might not immediately cross your mind. The game looks good and it looks like it could be a blast, and for some instances, it is. But the main problem with this game is that it's just a bare-bone corridor shooter where you just aim and kill aliens, walk over to an objective marker, and maybe do some other tasks like destroying shit on the spaceship, because I'm pretty sure that we aren't at risk if just one single spark goes off in the ship, it's gonna send the whole thing to hell. But let me go into a little bit more depth. In this game, aside from taking control of a bunch of Terminator Space Marines, you're primarily exclusively taking control of a librarian, which is a psyker. I'm pretty sure that's what they're called. And in controlling this character, you're able to do some cool magic shit, like sending out a bolt of lightning, fire or a shockwave if we don't feel like wasting our infinite ammo weapons on the enemies. Need to be conservative despite our supply being endless, right? And whilst you do have 2 squad mates with you, the closest thing that you can actually do with them is give them pretty basic commands that in no way, shape, or form capture the essence of what made the previous 2 games so special. Hell, the only thing you'll ever really be doing with your squad mate is tell them to either heal you or themselves, which is something I can confirm they can do pretty well, so good for them. Hell, the only other thing I can really call strategy in this game is the fact that you're able to open up a side gate at any point during the mission, which after 10 seconds will transport you back to this game's hub, where you can heal your entire squad, even revive some of them if they fall during battle, and also customize your loadouts. And I mean, it's not like you're not rewarded whenever you finish a level, because you do get skill points that you're able to buy new abilities, like new magic stuff. So at the very least, there is an incentive for you to keep pushing forward to see how the game can improve upon this. But I don't know, dude. While this game can be fun if you just want to finally take on the role as a leader of a squad of Terminators and kill hordes of different enemies without pesky strategy screens and stuff getting in the way, then yeah, sure, it succeeds. But in my opinion, it just sadly loses a lot of what made the OG FPS Space Hulk so special to begin with. So the only way how I'd recommend you give this game a go is if you choose to do what I do. Tell other people to stay away from it. Now moving on to yet another realm of the 40k universe, Necromunda Hired Gun decides to ditch putting you in the shoes of Flash Gitz' mascot or a band of misfits that got lost on their way to a D&D expo. No, Hired Gun puts you into the shoes of a mercenary doing wall runs, air dashes, visceral kills, and squeaking a dog toy to call on your good boy to kill anybody who smells funny. Now if you couldn't tell, then yes, a lot of the inspiration for Necromunda Hired Gun came from the newly released Doom games as well as a little bit of Titanfall 2. And when you get into a groove and just nail every single piece of movement abilities and combat that this game has to offer, it can offer you almost as close of an experience, if not on par with id Software's biggest cash cow. But then you realize that this game is not very polished. Whether we're talking about combat animations to how clunky the movement can feel at some points to this.
Open this rust damn door!
Brilliant. This game is definitely lacking in the polish department, but if you look past all of that, except when you die over and over again because the game keeps spawning you where you died because they must have realized that the ending fight in the first Doctor Strange movie needed an adaptation, this game is definitely scoring high marks for me so far, because the core gameplay itself is just fun. And who doesn't like squeaking this toy, seeing your puppy come to play and go on a killing spree? Seems like the perfect dynamic to me, hence why I'm going to be sure to teach our Alsatian to do these tricks, because my baby isn't going to cut it. This game, I will say, is still a little bit on the tad expensive side, but I'd say that if you see it for a decent price, give it a go. You might find yourself having as much fun of a time, if not more so. Now remember how I asked how Vermintide would work in the Warhammer 40k universe? I regret asking that question. Now listen, when it comes down to the overall gameplay of Darktide, the mechanics of shooting and melee attacking all still check off the right boxes for me, but the biggest problem with this game, guess what? Why not make this game a crossover with Left 4 Dead and Destiny? Because this game shoehorns a similar kind of hub area, always online connectivity that decides that if your internet dips its toe into a fucking chocolate fountain, it shits itself and kicks you out of the match. In my playtime with this game, I shit you not, I think I've only ever managed to beat 2 missions because every single time my internet even had a whiff of an idea of disconnecting, the game lagged like a motherfucker and kicked me out, causing me to not be very happy. Which sucks because I still think that if you treat this game in a vacuum, it is still leaps and bounds above any other game that attempts to cash in onto the success of Left 4 Dead. But mixing this type of game with the moniker that's more akin to the worst kind of live service games, this is also something I can't really go out of my way to recommend when you consider that Vermintide is still an option. And this game doesn't even have the added benefits of at least having furries in it. But unfortunately, I don't even realistically think that Skaven are gonna be enough to save this game. Hey, wow, you made it to the ending. But now I'm gonna leave you guys with the choice, and it's going to be a hard one, but we'll brave the storm together and you'll be okay, I promise. I already made a full-length video on Boltgun where I went extremely in-depth with it, so I'll leave a link to the video in the description, or just click right here at the top right. Or you can stay and keep me company because I'm very lonely and yearn for human interaction. So please don't leave. If there's one game in this entire list that you need to play, doesn't matter how much of a Warhammer nut you are, if you love great controlling and great feeling boomer shooters, Boltgun is second to none. This was a game that I got day one and I put so much time into it when it came out. And even when I was gathering footage for this video, all those fond memories and excitement just came flooding back. Boltgun is pretty much a high recommendation through and through. It has the best levels, it has the best art direction, it has the best fucking weapons on anything that you'll find on this entire list. So I don't really care if you're a 40k fan or not, this is something that you have to play, so go ahead, do it, if not for the gameplay, levels, etc., if only for the taunt button because Malum Kato is truly my beloved.